In a little village tucked away in a quiet corner of the world, there was a shop like no other. It wasn't the biggest shop nor the most brightly lit. In fact, if you walked by it, you might almost miss it. But if you looked just a little closer, something about it would catch your eye. The shop had an air of mystery that whispered, "Come inside if you dare." It was a tiny place with a wooden door that creaked as it opened and a bell that rang with a soft tinkle. The shop was called the Wandering Wands, but it wasn't the kind of place you'd find on a map. No one really knew how long it had been there or who had opened it in the first place. It had always been a part of the village, hiding in plain sight, just waiting for someone curious enough to step inside. The air around the shop always seemed to be just a little bit different. There was a certain hum, like the world was holding its breath, just waiting for something extraordinary to happen. The faint scent of vanilla and old books drifted from the open door, tickling your nose with a promise of secrets and adventure. Inside, the shop was even more enchanting. Shelves upon shelves, crammed with strange and unusual objects, lined the walls. Some were dusty, as if they hadn't been touched in years, while others seemed to glow with a soft light, beckoning curious hands to reach out and explore. There were jars filled with shimmering dust, boxes that rattled on their own, and books with spines that shimmered in the dim light, their pages whispering tales of forgotten lands. But most fascinating of all were the wands, tall and short, thin and thick, with handles made of every material imaginable: silver, gold, wood, crystal, even stone. They were scattered across the shelves like forgotten treasures, each one holding a promise of magic. As you wandered further into the shop, your eyes would settle on the counter at the back, where the shopkeeper stood. An old woman with twinkling eyes and a smile that made you feel as though she knew something you didn't. Her name was Mary Norton, and though she looked ordinary enough, there was something about her that made you feel as though you had just stepped into a world of wonder. Mary Norton's hair was white as snow, her hands delicate and soft, but her eyes were sharp, full of mystery, and glimmered with secrets only she understood. She was always busy, humming to herself as she dusted the shelves, rearranged items, or tended to the odd little plants that grew in the shop's corners. But every so often, when the bell above the door tinkled, she would look up, her smile widening, and she'd say in a voice that seemed to carry the weight of 1,000 stories, "Ah, I see we have a curious one today." There was no doubt about it. This was a shop for the brave, for the adventurous, for those who dared to explore the unknown. But no one could ever tell you what would happen when you entered. It was as if the shop had a magic of its own, one that only revealed itself to those who were ready to see. The moment you stepped through the door, the world outside would seem to fade away. The village, the trees, the sky, all would disappear, leaving only the soft glow of the shop's lights, the smell of mystery in the air, and the sound of the wind as it gently brushed against the windows. Inside, time didn't seem to matter anymore. Hours could pass and you wouldn't even notice. You'd be too wrapped up in the magic around you. But there was something else, something hidden beneath the charm and allure of the shop. For behind the glowing wands and the delicate trinkets, there was a secret waiting to be discovered, a secret that no one but a true adventurer could uncover. And for those who were brave enough to venture beyond the door, the shop promised a journey unlike any other, one full of twists, turns, and wonders beyond imagination. And as you stood there, staring at the wands and feeling that magical hum in the air, you might find yourself wondering, what would happen if you reached for one of those wands? What would it feel like? What adventure would it lead you on? For the curious, for the brave, and for those willing to take a chance, the Wandering Wands was the place where stories began, a place where anything could happen. But most importantly, it was a place where the journey was as magical as the destination. In the heart of the village, where the sun always seemed to shine a little brighter, lived a girl named Mary Norton. Excitement seemed to follow her everywhere. Whether she was running through the streets or skipping down the winding forest paths, Mary's energy was contagious. She was curious, always asking questions, always wondering about the world around her. She wasn't just a dreamer, she was a doer. A mischievous little explorer who loved nothing more than solving mysteries. Mary was small, with wild, unruly curls that framed her face, constantly escaping from the braids she tried to keep them in. Her eyes were big and bright, full of wonder, twinkling with curiosity. They sparkled every time she looked at something new, something exciting. She was the kind of girl who would peer into the darkest corners of a room, looking for secrets, eager to unravel whatever mystery lay hidden there. Her cheeks were dotted with freckles, like tiny stars scattered across her face. She wasn't afraid of getting dirty or messy, because to Mary, every little scrape and muddy patch was a badge of honor from her latest adventure. Mary loved to explore. No place was too far, no place too strange. She could often be found wandering through the forests near her village, where tall trees stood like sentinels watching over the land. The forest had always been a place of mystery to the villagers, with whispers of strange creatures and hidden paths. Most children stayed close to home, but not Mary. She was brave, always pushing herself to discover what others were too afraid to find. One afternoon, while Mary was walking through the forest, she stumbled across something that sent a thrill through her. Hidden between two ancient oak trees was a tiny door, barely noticeable. The wood was old, weathered, but there was something about it, a whisper in the air, that made her pause. She stepped closer, her heart racing. Curiosity pulsed through her, and her hands trembled with excitement as she reached for the door's golden handle. The moment her fingers brushed against it, she felt a spark of energy run through her, as if the door itself was alive. What could it be? She wondered aloud, her voice barely above a whisper. Her breath quickened and her eyes grew wide. She had discovered something new, something that could change everything. The door beckoned her, promising a world of unknown wonders. She grinned mischievously, knowing that this was just the beginning of an adventure unlike any she had ever experienced. With a deep breath, Mary turned the handle, and the door creaked open. Beyond it lay a narrow path that seemed to lead into a deeper part of the forest, one that Mary had never seen before. The trees there were even taller, their branches thick and twisting together, creating a canopy that blocked out most of the sunlight. The air was thick with the scent of moss and earth, and the ground beneath her feet was soft and spongy. This is it, Mary thought, her heart pounding with excitement. She had stepped into the unknown, just like she had always wanted. She felt a thrill run through her, a rush of energy as her imagination soared. What wonders could she uncover in this strange new world? What mysteries waited to be solved? As she ventured deeper into the woods, she didn't look back. She knew she would find something amazing, something that no one else had ever seen before. Every rustling leaf, every creaking branch was a hint, a clue in the grand adventure she was about to embark on. Her eyes scanned every shadow, every corner, looking for any sign of something hidden. She loved this feeling, the excitement, the uncertainty, the mystery. Mary's thoughts raced. She was ready for whatever the forest could throw at her. The sound of distant laughter echoed through her mind, reminding her that she had never been alone in her adventures. But now the adventure was hers. She felt the weight of the unknown pressing against her, and instead of feeling afraid, she felt alive, empowered, eager to discover the secrets waiting just ahead. As she walked further into the mysterious woods, a soft breeze ruffled her hair, and the whisper of leaves rustling carried through the air. Her ears perked up as she heard something. A faint sound, like a bell, ringing softly, coming from deeper in the woods. She paused, her heart skipping a beat. Could it be a treasure? A hidden city? The thought filled her with anticipation. With a grin, she pressed forward, her pace quickening, her breath catching in her throat. She was on the edge of something big. She could feel it in the air, thick with anticipation and magic. Every step she took brought her closer to something extraordinary, and she couldn't wait to find out what it was. As Mary Norton ventured deeper into the mysterious woods, the air grew thicker, almost like a veil of anticipation was hanging around her. She had been walking for what seemed like hours, her feet crunching softly against the forest floor. The trees, tall and imposing, stretched above her, blocking most of the sunlight. The further she went, the quieter it became, almost too quiet. It was as if the forest itself was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. Mary felt it too. A sense of unease began to creep up on her. She paused for a moment, her eyes scanning the shadows between the trees. There was something different about this part of the woods. The feeling in the air was thick, and every small sound seemed amplified. She heard a twig snap behind her, and for a split second she froze. Her heart raced, but she quickly shook it off. "It's just the wind," she whispered to herself, but the words didn't quite convince her. A soft rustling sound came from ahead, almost like footsteps. Not the kind of normal forest rustling that came from animals, but something deliberate. Curiosity tingled at Mary's fingertips. She turned slowly, her eyes narrowing as she tried to make out what was ahead. She could see nothing, just more trees and shadows. But that sound, it was real. Determined not to be scared, Mary took a deep breath and pressed forward. Her instincts told her that she was close to something. She could feel it. The forest was hiding a secret, and she was going to find it. Suddenly, a distant sound caught her attention. A low, eerie creak coming from somewhere deeper in the woods. Mary's eyes widened. The sound was coming from under the ground? She paused, listening intently. It sounded like something moving in the earth itself, as though the forest was alive in a way she couldn't understand. The trees around her seemed to shift slightly, as though they were trying to hide something from her. Unease filled her chest, but she pressed on. The path ahead grew even narrower, the trees crowding in on her as if trying to block her way. Then, just when she thought the path would close off entirely, she spotted something. An old stone wall, partially hidden by the thick vines that snaked up around it. A wall in the middle of the forest? Her heart skipped a beat. She had never seen anything like this before. With a mischievous grin, she stepped closer to the stone wall, eager to uncover what was hidden behind it. The moment her hand brushed the vines, she felt a strange shiver run through her. Something about it felt wrong. The vines seemed to pull back slightly, revealing an old wooden door. The door was ancient, covered in strange symbols and markings that Mary couldn't quite decipher. It looked like it hadn't been touched in years, yet there was a whisper in the air, a call from behind the door that Mary couldn't ignore. She leaned in closer, her breath held in excitement. But just as she reached for the door, she heard it again. The faintest sound like a soft whisper coming from the other side. Her heart raced. What was behind that door? She wasn't sure, but one thing was certain. She had to find out. With trembling fingers, she turned the handle. The door creaked open slowly, revealing a small, dimly lit room beyond. The air inside was cool and damp, filled with the scent of earth and decay. The room was empty, save for a single wooden chest sitting in the center of the floor. Mary's breath caught in her throat. The chest was old, covered in dust and cobwebs. She could see that it had been there for years, perhaps even centuries, waiting for someone to find it. Her hands shook with excitement as she stepped inside the room. She could feel the weight of the mystery pressing in on her, curiosity tugging at her mind. She approached the chest carefully, her heart pounding in her chest. What could be inside? A treasure? A secret map? Something far more magical than she could imagine? As she knelt beside the chest and reached for the latch, something strange happened. The air around her seemed to grow heavier, and the room suddenly felt colder. Unease washed over her once again. She hesitated, her hand hovering over the latch. Was she ready for what lay inside? Could she handle whatever she might find? As Mary stepped deeper into the forest, the map's presence in her pocket felt like a weight of mystery pressing against her chest. Every step she took seemed to echo in the stillness of the woods, amplifying the feeling that something unseen was watching her. The trees swayed gently, their leaves rustling as if they were whispering secrets only they knew. The path she was following grew narrower, the air growing colder, and the shadows longer. It was as though the forest itself was alive, shifting and changing as she moved through it. The wind picked up, sending a chill down Mary's spine. The map, still safe in her pocket, seemed to call to her, urging her forward. With each step, her anticipation grew, her heart racing in her chest. She couldn't explain it, but something told her she was getting closer to something important, something magical. Suddenly, she stopped in her tracks. The trees ahead of her seemed to open up, revealing a small clearing bathed in soft, dappled light. At the center of the clearing stood an ancient stone archway covered in ivy and moss. The stones were worn but still strong, and just beyond the archway, something shimmered. Mary squinted, trying to make sense of it. There, barely visible through the mist that had begun to roll in, was a faint light flickering like a distant star. Her heart skipped a beat. Was that magic? Mary's curiosity got the better of her. She moved toward the archway, her feet light on the ground, barely making a sound. The air around her felt charged, as though she had crossed into another realm. Her breath came in quick bursts, the excitement nearly overwhelming. She reached the archway and paused for a moment, her hand hovering above the stone. The map in her pocket seemed to hum softly, as though it recognized something she didn't. With a deep breath, Mary stepped through the archway. The moment she did, the light flickered brighter, almost as if welcoming her. The mist swirled around her, making it difficult to see clearly, but she could make out shapes moving in the haze. She pressed on, her senses alert, her every step an adventure into the unknown. The light grew stronger, and soon the mist parted to reveal an incredible sight. In front of her stood an enormous tree, its trunk wide and knotted, its branches stretching far into the sky. The tree seemed ancient, older than anything she had ever seen. But it wasn't just the tree that drew her attention. It was the faint glow coming from a small opening in its trunk, a tiny golden light that beckoned her forward. Mary's breath caught in her throat. She could feel the magic in the air, the pull of the unknown. This was it, the place the map had led her to. Without hesitation, she approached the tree, her eyes fixed on the glowing light. As she drew closer, the air grew warmer, and the sounds of the forest seemed to fade into silence. She reached out, her fingers trembling slightly as she touched the glowing spot on the tree's bark. The light pulsed under her touch, and for a moment everything around her seemed to hold its breath. And then, with a soft click, the tree opened. Mary gasped, stepping back slightly. The opening was small, just big enough for her to slip through. She couldn't believe it. This was it. The mystery she had been chasing, the adventure she had longed for, was right in front of her. Her heart raced in her chest as she glanced back over her shoulder. The forest was quiet, the only sound the soft rustle of the leaves overhead. She knew she was about to enter something no one had ever seen before, something that had been hidden for centuries, waiting for someone with the curiosity and courage to find it. And she was that someone. With a deep breath and a determined look on her face, Mary stepped through the opening. The moment she passed through, she found herself in a completely different place. It was as if she had crossed into another world entirely. The sky above was a deep, dark purple, streaked with shimmering stars. The ground beneath her feet was soft and spongy, like moss, but with a faint glow of its own. The air was filled with the scent of flowers and something sweeter, something she couldn't place. It was peaceful, yet strangely exhilarating at the same time. As Mary took a few tentative steps into this new world, she realized she wasn't alone. The trees here were even older than the ones in the forest, their branches twisting and reaching out as though trying to speak to her. Strange creatures, like glowing butterflies and tiny floating orbs, darted around her, filling the air with a soft musical hum. It was beautiful, it was magical, but it was also unfamiliar. Mary felt a twinge of uncertainty in her stomach. What was this place? Where was she? But then her eyes fell on something that made her heart skip a beat. Just ahead, near a large stone that seemed to pulse with a soft, inner light, was a figure. It was tall, cloaked in shadow, but there was something strangely familiar about the silhouette. It wasn't human, but it was alive, radiating a kind of ancient power that Mary could feel deep within her bones. The figure turned slowly, its face hidden in the shadow of its hood, but Mary could feel its eyes on her. A strange connection seemed to form between them, as if the figure was expecting her. "You've come," the figure said, in a voice that was deep and full of ancient knowledge. "But the journey is only beginning." Mary's heart raced. She had no idea what was happening, but she knew, deep in her heart, that this was what she had been searching for. As Mary ventured deeper into the mysterious land, her heart was racing with excitement and curiosity. The air felt heavier now, filled with a hum of energy that she could almost feel pulsing in her fingertips. Each step was like walking on a dream, and she couldn't help but look around in awe at the glowing plants and shimmering air. The sky above, though dark, seemed to be alive, twinkling with a million tiny stars that sparkled more brightly than any she had ever seen. The ancient trees around her whispered in a language she didn't understand, but their leaves rustled with a sense of urgency, as if calling her closer. There, ahead of her, was a glowing stone pedestal, its surface smooth and shining like silver under the stars. On it sat an orb, a crystal sphere the size of her head. It pulsed with a soft light, casting gentle glows across the surrounding clearing. Mary's breath caught in her throat as she took a step closer. The orb seemed to be waiting for her, its glow brighter as she approached, as though sensing her presence. Her fingers twitched with the urge to touch it, but something held her back. She could feel that this was no ordinary object. This was magic, something powerful and ancient. As Mary stepped closer, she noticed faint markings on the pedestal, lines and symbols that seemed to shift and change when she looked at them directly. It was as if they were alive, reacting to her curiosity. A sense of excitement surged through her veins, but she couldn't shake the feeling that something was about to change, something important. Suddenly, the ground beneath her feet shifted slightly, and she stepped back, startled. The orb's glow flickered, then dimmed before flickering again. Mary looked around, her heart racing. Then a voice, soft yet powerful, echoed through the clearing. It was the same voice she had heard before, the one that had spoken from the shadows. The voice now filled the air around her, surrounding her with words she could feel in her very bones. "To unlock the magic of this orb," the voice rumbled, "you must solve the riddle of the ancient tree. Only the pure of heart and clever of mind may pass." Mary's heart pounded in her chest. A riddle. She had always been good at puzzles, but she knew this was no ordinary challenge. The air grew still, the sounds of the forest fading away, and all that remained was the soft voice that seemed to swirl around her. The riddle is simple, yet difficult to see. Look carefully at the tree, and you'll find the answer you need. The tree she had seen earlier loomed in the distance. Mary turned toward it, her curiosity building with each step. The voice seemed to echo in her mind, urging her forward. She walked slowly, her eyes scanning the trunk of the massive tree, searching for any clue. The bark was gnarled and twisted, with knots and bumps in places where she expected smoothness. Finally, her eyes locked onto something peculiar. A small circular pattern had formed in the bark, glowing faintly in the dark. It was a ring of symbols, almost like a key. There were lines crisscrossing within it, and at its center, a glowing symbol that looked like a spiral. Mary reached out carefully and touched the pattern. The moment her fingers brushed the bark, the pattern began to move. It twisted and spiraled, just like the symbol at the center. Her heart skipped a beat, and she knew this was it. She had to solve the riddle. Suddenly, the voice returned, its tone warm and inviting, but with a slight challenge. To unlock the power of the orb, you must choose. What is your key? The answer lies within you. Mary stood still, her hand still resting on the tree. She thought about the words, her key. Her key was curiosity. It was her ability to see the world not as it was, but as it could be. She was a dreamer, an explorer, and her heart was filled with wonder at the mysteries of the world. With newfound confidence, Mary whispered aloud, "Curiosity is my key." The spiral symbol flared bright with light, and the tree trembled gently. The ground beneath her feet shifted once again, and suddenly, the orb in the distance began to glow brightly, its light reaching all around her. A soft hum filled the air, resonating with something deep inside Mary. The challenge had been met. The riddle had been solved. As the orb glowed brighter, she realized something. She had unlocked something powerful. The magical world around her was responding to her answer, and it was alive with energy. With a deep breath, Mary stepped towards the glowing orb. She knew the adventure was far from over, but now she was ready. As Mary stepped closer to the orb, her heart raced faster, thumping in her chest like a drum. The air around her hummed with magic, crackling lightly, almost as if it was alive. Every step she took felt like she was walking on the edge of something extraordinary. The light from the orb bathed the clearing in a soft golden glow, casting long shadows that danced around her. The trees seemed to lean in, as if they too were watching her, waiting for what would come next. She reached out slowly, her fingers tingling in anticipation. As soon as her hand touched the cool, smooth surface of the orb, a rush of energy surged through her, almost making her step back. But Mary held firm, determined to understand what this magical object was and how to unlock its secrets. Suddenly, a burst of light shot out from the orb, enveloping the entire clearing. For a brief moment, everything around Mary went completely white. She blinked and squinted, trying to make sense of the dazzling brightness. When the light faded, she found herself standing in a completely different place. A wide open space surrounded by towering trees, with leaves that shimmered like diamonds in the moonlight. The air was thick with magic, and the ground beneath her feet felt soft and springy, as though she were walking on a bed of clouds. In the distance, Mary saw a sparkling river winding its way through the landscape. The water sparkled with hues of blue and purple, glimmering in the light of a crescent moon hanging in the sky. It was like nothing Mary had ever seen before, beautiful, mysterious, and incredibly magical. At first, Mary was unsure of what to do next. The clearing she had just been in had vanished, and now she was in an entirely new, unknown place. The orb still pulsed gently in her hand, and as she looked at it, she heard a soft voice, familiar yet distant, whispering through the air. "The path ahead is not easy, young adventurer," the voice said, gentle but firm. "You must face the challenges that await you if you are to unlock the orb's true power." Mary nodded, determination sparkling in her eyes. She wasn't afraid. She had faced many challenges in her life, and this was an adventure like no other. With the orb in hand, she stepped forward, ready to face whatever awaited her. The first challenge appeared before her almost immediately. As she walked deeper into the mystical landscape, the ground ahead began to tremble. The trees around her shook, their leaves rustling like whispers, and from the earth itself a creature emerged. At first it looked like a shadow, long and twisting, with glowing eyes that shone like stars. The creature took shape, revealing itself to be a large four-legged beast made of shimmering stone and glowing moss. Its eyes glowed a soft, eerie green, and its body seemed to pulse with a life of its own. Mary took a step back, instinctively clutching the orb. The creature's gaze turned toward her, and for a moment, everything was still. The creature's eyes softened as though studying her. It was clear that it wasn't hostile, but it was guarding something important. "To pass," the creature's deep voice rumbled, "you must solve the riddle of the moonlit path. Answer wisely, and you may continue. Fail, and you will be lost here forever." Mary swallowed nervously, but she stood tall. She had always loved puzzles and mysteries, and this was no different. The creature's gaze never left her, and for a moment it seemed as though the world was holding its breath. She could hear the faint rustle of leaves, the distant sound of the sparkling river, but nothing else. The creature's challenge was clear. The creature's voice filled the air again, steady and calm, as though testing her resolve. "I am a path, but I do not lead the way. I guide with light, but I am not the sun. I shine brightest in the dark and disappear in the day. What am I?" Mary's mind raced. She took a deep breath, closing her eyes for a moment as she thought carefully. It wasn't just the answer that mattered, it was the way she thought about it. She could feel the orb in her hand, warm against her skin, almost as though it was guiding her thoughts. The riddle seemed impossible at first, but then the answer came to her. She smiled to herself, her face lighting up with understanding. "The moon," she said confidently, opening her eyes and meeting the creature's gaze. "The answer is the moon. It shines brightest in the night, guiding the way when the sun has disappeared." The creature's eyes glowed brighter, and for a moment Mary was sure she had done something wrong. But then the creature nodded slowly, its body shifting with the movement of the earth. It stepped aside, revealing a path that led deeper into the magical forest. The orb pulsed in her hand, glowing brighter with each step she took toward the newly revealed path. "You are clever," the creature said, its voice softer now, almost approving. "But remember, young adventurer, the path ahead is filled with challenges. Stay true to yourself and trust the magic within you." With that, the creature disappeared into the forest, leaving Mary standing on the threshold of the next part of her adventure. She took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the challenge ahead, but also a growing sense of excitement. The magic was real. The journey had only just begun, and she was ready for whatever came next. Mary stepped onto the path, feeling the cool breeze of the forest brush past her skin. The orb in her hand pulsed with energy, and she could feel the magic of the place filling her with strength and courage. Her heart beat faster with anticipation as she walked further into the unknown, eager to uncover the next secret and unlock the mysteries of the magical world. The path Mary had taken was long and winding. Her feet were sore, and her mind raced with thoughts of the challenges that lay ahead. Yet, the orb in her hand never wavered, its soft, reassuring glow keeping her on course. She had solved riddles, faced strange creatures, and uncovered hidden secrets. But now, at the heart of the enchanted forest, stood the greatest test of all. Before her loomed an ancient door, crafted from gnarled wood, thick vines wrapping around its frame. It was adorned with intricate runes, glowing faintly in the twilight. But the door was sealed, and no matter how she pushed, pulled, or turned the ancient handle, it refused to budge. The path had led her here, but now it seemed as if her journey had come to an end. A deep sense of doubt crept into her mind. Could she really solve this final puzzle? Had she come so far only to fail now? She glanced at the orb once more, its glow pulsing with a gentle rhythm, almost like a heartbeat. For a moment she stood still, her eyes closed, listening to the sounds of the forest around her, the rustling leaves, the chirping of distant creatures, the soft hum of magic. "Don't give up," she whispered to herself. "I've made it this far. I can do this." As she spoke those words, she felt a surge of energy, like a gentle breeze lifting her spirits. The orb in her hand warmed, and the door, as if sensing her renewed determination, began to respond. The runes on the door flickered to life one by one, lighting up in a soft cascade, starting at the bottom and rising up toward the top. A low rumble echoed through the ground, and with a creak, the door began to open. Mary's heart skipped a beat, but she steadied herself. She had faced so many unknowns on this journey. This was just another challenge, one she was ready for. She stepped through the door into the next chamber, her eyes wide with awe. Inside was a cavernous space, bathed in the glow of soft, golden light. The walls were lined with ancient crystals that hummed with energy, and at the center of the room stood a pedestal. On it rested a glowing stone, a gem that seemed to pulse with a light all its own. It was beautiful, mesmerizing, and familiar. The orb in her hand suddenly flared brightly, sending a pulse of light throughout the room. The gem on the pedestal mirrored it, glowing with increasing intensity. A voice echoed through the cavern, deep and resonant, but gentle. "You have proven yourself worthy," it said, the sound vibrating in the air. "This gem is the heart of the magic that surrounds you. It was always meant for you, Mary Norton, the one with the heart full of curiosity and courage." A wave of warmth washed over Mary, and she realized that the orb had led her here. It had been guiding her all along, offering her the strength to face every challenge, to push forward despite her doubts. She reached out, placing the orb beside the gem. As soon as the two touched, the cavern filled with a brilliant light, and the gem's glow became even more radiant, casting shadows that danced like flames. "Thank you," Mary whispered, her voice full of gratitude. "I couldn't have done this alone." The voice responded, soft and kind. "You were never alone, young adventurer. You carried the magic within you all along. This journey was not only about finding the heart of the forest, but also about discovering the heart within yourself. As the light faded, the cavern returned to its calm, golden glow. The gem now rested in her hand, warm and powerful. Mary felt a surge of pride, of accomplishment, knowing she had unlocked not just the magic of the forest, but the magic inside her. She turned to leave the cavern, the path back now clear. The once mysterious forest, with all its puzzles and wonders, now seemed like a place she had always known. The creatures she had met along the way, the riddles she had solved, the challenges she had overcome. They were all part of her journey, part of who she had become. Stepping out into the open air, Mary looked at the sky, the stars twinkling above her like tiny, distant dreams. She smiled to herself, her heart light with joy and contentment. She had done it. She had succeeded. The journey had taught her so much. It had shown her that bravery didn't always mean having no fear. It meant facing those fears head on. It had taught her that curiosity wasn't just about asking questions. It was about believing in herself enough to seek the answers. And most of all, it had taught her that kindness to herself and others could open doors to magic she never thought possible. As she walked away from the forest, the gem still glowing softly in her hand, she knew that this was just the beginning. The world was full of mysteries and adventures waiting to be discovered, and she, Mary Norton, was ready for them all. Mary's hands trembled slightly as she clutched the gem, the light it emitted still warm against her palm. She looked around, her eyes scanning the now calm and serene forest. The once formidable place was now a familiar friend, its secrets revealed, its mysteries solved. She couldn't help but smile, feeling a quiet joy bubbling up inside her. She had faced challenges that seemed impossible, but here she was, holding the very essence of magic in her hands. It was as though everything had led her to this exact moment, as if every step she had taken, every choice she had made, had been part of a much bigger story. Her story. The voice that had guided her earlier spoke again, this time even softer, like a whisper on the breeze. You have learned well, Mary Norton. Your heart is filled with more than just magic. It holds the strength of courage, the wisdom of curiosity, and the warmth of kindness. These will carry you far. Mary paused, the words sinking deep into her heart. She had never thought of herself as particularly brave or special, but now, standing in the heart of this enchanted place, she realized that the adventure had been as much about discovering the power within her as it had been about finding the magic around her. She looked down at the glowing gem in her hand, and for the first time, it wasn't just a treasure to her. It was a symbol of everything she had overcome and everything she still had to discover. It was a reminder that her journey didn't end here. This was just the beginning. The forest seemed to embrace her, its trees swaying gently as if acknowledging her triumph. The air was still, calm, but filled with a sense of celebration, like the forest itself was rejoicing with her. Mary felt a sense of peace settle in her chest, replacing the anxiety and fear she had once felt. She had faced the unknown, and she had done so with heart, curiosity, and an open mind. The world outside the forest was waiting for her, full of possibilities. She walked toward the entrance, the soft rustling of leaves beneath her feet. Her footsteps felt lighter, freer, each one a reminder of how far she had come. With every step, she let go of any lingering doubt, embracing the future with open arms. As she reached the edge of the forest, the sky above her had deepened into a rich twilight blue, the stars beginning to sparkle one by one. Mary paused for a moment, taking in the beauty around her. The air smelled of damp earth and blooming flowers, and the faintest breeze teased her hair. With a soft exhale, Mary held the gem up to the sky, its light shimmering against the backdrop of the stars. "I did it," she whispered to herself, a grin spreading across her face. In that moment, she realized something profound. The challenges she had faced, the mysteries she had solved, weren't just about unlocking magical secrets or finding hidden treasures. They were about unlocking herself. They were about trusting her instincts, embracing uncertainty, and having the courage to take the next step, even when she didn't know where it would lead. The voice of the forest spoke again, more tender this time, as though the trees themselves were whispering directly to her. Remember, Mary, magic is not just in what you discover, it's in who you become along the way. Mary nodded, feeling a warm, comforting sensation spread through her chest. She had always been afraid of what lay ahead. But now she felt ready for whatever adventure awaited her next. With one final glance at the enchanted forest, she smiled, feeling as though the entire world was waiting just for her. She wasn't the same person who had first stepped into these woods. She had changed, she had grown, and now, with a new sense of purpose and wonder in her heart, she stepped into the night, ready for the next chapter of her journey. As Mary stood at the edge of the forest, the stars above her seemed to twinkle a little brighter, as though they were winking at her in silent approval. She took a deep breath, her chest rising and falling, with a sense of contentment that she hadn't known she was missing. The adventure had been long, challenging, and sometimes even a little scary. But now, as the night sky stretched out before her, she felt lighter than she ever had before. The air around her was calm, and the cool breeze carried the faint scent of wildflowers. It was a peaceful, soothing kind of night, the perfect end to a journey filled with wonder and surprises. Mary's heart swelled with a quiet joy as she thought about everything she had discovered. Not just about magic, but about herself. She had faced fears she hadn't known she had, uncovered secrets hidden in the most unexpected places, and learned to trust her instincts. But most of all, she had learned to believe in her own strength. The magical gem that now rested safely in her pocket wasn't just a treasure from the forest. It was a symbol of her courage, her curiosity, and her unshakable belief that no mystery was too big to solve. The forest, now calm and serene, seemed to welcome her back as she walked slowly toward the path that would lead her home. The ancient trees whispered softly in the breeze, their leaves rustling like a quiet song of goodbyes. Mary smiled, knowing that this wasn't the end of her story. It was simply the beginning of a new chapter. She had learned that there was magic everywhere, in the world, in the people she met, and especially within herself. Her thoughts drifted back to all the lessons she had learned during her adventure. She had learned that no matter how big or small the challenge, courage wasn't about not feeling scared. It was about moving forward even when fear seemed to loom large. And curiosity was the key to unlocking so many doors. It was the spark that had led her into the heart of this mysterious forest, and it would continue to guide her wherever she went. But most importantly, Mary had learned that kindness was the most powerful magic of all. Along the way, she had met creatures and people who were different from her, who had their own dreams and struggles. But with a kind heart and a willingness to help, she had been able to bring light to their lives, just as they had brought light to hers. As she walked through the now quiet forest, Mary paused to look back one last time. The soft glow of the magic still lingered in the air, casting a gentle light over the path ahead. She could hear the sounds of the night creatures, crickets chirping, owls hooting in the distance, but there was no longer any fear in their calls. The forest was at peace just as she was. And with that thought, she turned back toward the path leading home. But before she could take another step, she heard a soft voice behind her, a familiar, gentle voice that had been with her throughout her journey. "Mary Norton," the voice said, so calm and kind, "you have learned well, and now your story continues. Remember, the world is full of magic, magic that you will discover as you move forward. You have the power to create your own adventures, to write your own story, and to change the world around you. Mary felt a wave of warmth wash over her, and she turned toward the voice, though she could see no one. It was as if the very heart of the forest was speaking to her, wishing her well. Goodbye, Mary. But remember this: the greatest magic is not in finding treasures, but in the kindness you share and the courage you show. Keep believing in yourself, and your journey will always be full of wonder. Mary smiled, a soft, grateful smile. She didn't need to see anyone to know the message was true. She knew it in her heart. The adventure she had begun here in this magical place had already changed her, and now it was time to carry that change with her into the world. With one last glance at the glowing trees, she stepped onto the path that would lead her home. The adventure had been incredible, but there were many more waiting for her. She was ready. As she walked, her thoughts wandered ahead, imagining all the possibilities that awaited her. Would she travel to far-off lands? Would she discover more secrets hidden in the world? Would she meet new friends, solve new mysteries, and perhaps uncover even more magic? One thing was certain: Mary's story was far from over. And wherever it led, she would face it with the same courage, curiosity, and kindness that had brought her this far. The stars above shimmered brightly, as though they were smiling down on her, and the wind carried her thoughts forward, to the next adventure, to the next page of her story. And as she walked into the night, her heart was full of hope, full of wonder, and full of the belief that the best was yet to come. "Good night, adventure," Mary whispered to the sky, her voice soft but full of promise. "I'll see you soon." And with that, the forest faded into the distance, but the magic she had discovered would stay with her, always. If you love, pick your phone and do it in 3 seconds. First press like, then subscribe, and then press share and choose the option. At top, it's going to be amazing. Don't forget to leave a heart in comments.